Cycling is consistently ranked among the top sports played today. It is a technically hard sport that takes place at a frenzied pace and has a high rate of action. The sport of cycling has produced a lot of iconic moments that its followers will never forget. Think back on some of the best examples that are listed in the video. Hello and welcome back to Cycling News Live, friends. Today we'll watch the Top 10 Descent Edition. Are you excited, friends? Let's dive into the video without wasting much time, but before that, an important task for you all: just hit that bell icon on your right and subscribe to the channel. Number 1. The final descent of the Col de Mans was attacked with reckless abandon by Peter Sagan, but it was not enough for him to catch up to the Spanish rider Ruben Plaza. Again, Sagan came in the second position in the competition. During this season, he has finished in second place a total of 5 times. However, he has not yet won a stage of the Tour de France since 2013. The victory was Plaza's first in the Tour de France and his first overall Grand Tour stage win since 2005. Plaza is 35 years old. As the riders in the general classification crested the Col de Mans, they did everything in their power to conserve their energy by remaining in the back of the pack and allowing the leaders to build up a lead of more than 20 minutes. Sagan was one of the pioneers in this field. Shortly after the beginning of the stage, he led a group of 23 riders in a successful breakaway from the main pack of cyclists. After he caught up with Adam Hansen and Marco Haller on the Col de Mans, he led the pace for the majority of the climb. A number of cyclists launched attacks on the rider who was wearing the green jersey because they knew they needed a buffer to counterbalance Peter Sagan's ability to navigate the hazardous descent down to Gap. Only Plaza was successful in breaking free, and he was able to gain more than a minute on Sagan's group when they crested the final climb. Number 2. As the diminished lead group reached the top of the penultimate hill, the Col de Peyresourde, Chris Froome said that the choice to launch his surprise attack and take the yellow jersey came down to a spur-of-the-moment decision. After Froome had broken free, albeit initially only by a few meters, he was able to take advantage of the fact that he had engaged a gear that was slightly higher than normal in anticipation of the possibility that he may need it. I viewed it as a challenge that I needed to accept. I was aware that the downhill was going to be quick and without any turns, so I told myself, hold on, I've got a 54-tooth chainring on here instead of the typical 53 teeth. I will be able to cycle a little bit more than the other guys. Froome was able to pedal in his aerodynamic tuck position with less risk of becoming unstable because he used a slightly higher gear than normal. He attributed his skill through the sweeping bends on the descent to the competitive nature of Team Sky training camps, where the riders compete to be the fastest downhill rider. Number 3. It's time for another preview of the mountains that will be encountered on the Tour de France. Although the 2017 Tour de France course might not be the most difficult one ever, it is fairly comparable to previous years and includes some incredibly steep roads that are steeper than anything in the most recent Giro. And although some people might complain about the lack of mountaintop finishes, anyone who watched the Tour de France stage that finished on the descent of Mont du Chat, stage 9 in TDF, during the most recent Dauphiné would know that downhill racing can be very exciting. Let's look on the bright side. There are a number of magnificent mountain stages, each of which ought to result in some wonderful recollections. According to the difficulty model used in the 2017 Tour de France by Climb by Bike, the Col de Galibier was the most difficult climb. This was in part owing to its height, as the formula gives more weight to altitude than other factors. It is the highest point of the Tour at 2,642 meters, and as such, the first person to reach the peak will be awarded the Souvenir Henri Desgrange. The Desgrange monument is 1 kilometer below the Galibier summit. Number 4. Everyone speculated that the winner of the Milan-San Remo race would be determined by an attack by 2-time Tour de France winner Tadej Pogačar on an uphill section of the course. In the end, the winning move in the Spring Classic that took place on Saturday was a daring and high-speed downhill assault made by Matej Mohoric, another rider from Slovenia. Mohoric's effort proved to be successful. Mohoric accelerated virtually as soon as the tight descent began, which was immediately after the 4 unsuccessful attacks from Pogačar on the way up the Poggio. The Poggio is a short but steep hill that is located shortly before the conclusion of the marathon 293-kilometer circuit. Mohoric rapidly opened a tiny gap ahead of a group that included Pogačar, Wout van Aert, and Mathieu van der Poel, 3 of the most accomplished current riders in the sport. He did this by leaning dangerously into the sharp curves on the Serpentine circuit. Number 5. After a difficult 245-kilometer ride from Bergamo to Como, Vincenzo Nibali of the Astana team came out on top to win Il Lombardia, the most prestigious event of the European professional cycling season. He was the pre-race favorite, and he attacked his competitors on the steepest hills on the course. But they were always able to catch up to him, and he eventually came to the conclusion that he needed to alter his strategy. Nibali launched a significant assault approximately 152 miles before the finish of the race. He launched himself off of a downhill portion of the trail, and he spent the subsequent several minutes ripping bends and riding rails in a full tuck position. Because he was traveling so fast, he came dangerously close to colliding with some of the official race motorcycles that were in front of him. These motorcycles were moving at a pace that was obviously too slow for Nibali. Number 6. At Grand Bornand on Tuesday, Julien Alaphilippe won the 10th stage of the Tour de France, which was the first stage to be held in the Alps. With this victory, Alaphilippe became the first French rider to win the stage since the race began. Despite the fact that there were 4 hills on the program for the day, Belgian Greg van Avermaet managed to keep the leader's yellow jersey. At the age of 26, Alaphilippe became the youngest rider to ever win a stage of the Tour de France. In April, he took first place in the Flèche Wallonne, one of cycling's most prestigious races. After 158.5 kilometers, the puncher from Montluçon, who competes for the Belgian team Quick-Step, finished more than a minute and a half ahead of the Spaniard Ian Izagirre, Bahrain, and the Estonian Rein Taaramäe, Direct Energy. In the blazing heat of the Alps, the leading pack of cyclists reached the finish line more than 3 minutes behind schedule. During this stage, which was set to begin the day after the day of rest, the riders who had survived the breakaway of 21 riders that had been launched in the first half hour began their assault on the Rome climb with a lead of 6 minutes. Number 7. That insane drop with the tomb open, as Ormezzano likes to remark, is something that we are not likely to forget anytime soon. The Cipressa inverted, as Nicol Bonifacio encountered it at the San Remo, is the stuff of legend in the sport of cycling. Because the rider spends so much time practicing on particular roads, he or she is familiar with the curves that cause the motorcycle to fold. And that was the place in his of him San Remo where he experimented with everything, except for the fact that he went so quickly downhill that rather than taking away a small group, he disconnected everyone and took approximately 20 seconds longer in a few curves. In point of fact, equipment for acrobats. Number 8. After a failed attempt on Stage 9 of the Tour de France 2020, Mark Hirschi exacted his vengeance on the competition by claiming a solo victory on Stage 12 of the race. The Sunweb rider, who is 22 years old, had won over many people's hearts with his magnificent solo heroics on Stage 9 in La Runze. Nevertheless, he was ultimately defeated by Tadej Pogačar at the finish line, which was a source of great disappointment for him. But Stage 12 was eventually Hirschi's chance to shine as he launched an attack inside of the stage's final 30 kilometers and managed to win the stage despite a ferocious chase from his competitors. Number 9. On Thursday, Tom Pidcock won Stage 12 of the Tour de France 2022 for road cycling by completing a valiant solo ride up Alpe d'Huez. This victory earned him the yellow jersey. Jonas Vingegaard, who was leading the competition overall, managed to stave off a late challenge from Tadej Pogačar and managed his position as the leader in the overall standings. Pidcock, who was the MTB Olympic champion at Tokyo 2020, became the youngest ever stage victor atop the renowned climb. Pidcock, who was making his Tour debut, became the second British rider following Geraint Thomas in 2018 to triumph atop the legendary peak. Thomas won the stage in 2018. The Yorkshireman, who is 22 years old and now holds the 9th spot in the general classification, remarked that it was probably one of my best experiences in cycling. It was unreal. When you are literally slaloming through people, flags, fists, and God knows what else, you cannot experience that anywhere else other than on the Alpe d'Huez at the Tour de France, the announcer said. Number 10. What happens when the yellow jersey in the Tour de France gets a flat tire? Following a wheel change, Fabian Cancellara performed one of the greatest descents in cycling history, dodging around team cars and television crews on his way to the back of the race. It appears to be practically straightforward, and Cancellara lost little time as a result of the puncture. That's for today's video. We will be right back with more stuff like this. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel.